Hi, welcome to the Dairy Hour podcast, where rural charm meets personal growth. Join us as we milk every moment for wisdom, self-improvement, and mental wellness. I'm your host, Val Levine, a rural dairy farming mom with a passion for filling hearts while never forgetting to fill my own cup. Get ready for insightful conversations, empowering tips, and a splash of fun and laughs, of course. Let's cultivate growth, nourish our minds, and embrace the journey together. This is the Dairy Hour podcast, where every episode is a breath of fresh air and the inspiration you need to be your best self. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Dairy Hour podcast. I'm your host, Val Levine, and I'm joined today by Johanna Bossard, another fellow New York State dairy farmer. Johanna, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Pretty good. We were just griping about old lady issues, and we're both like, oh, we have a kink in our neck. So good thing we've got our chiropractors on speed dial, because that always makes things fun. But this is our 30s, and here we are. So Johanna, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about your...
I would love to. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you for the hour. My name is Johanna Bossard. I live in upstate central New York, so located in Fabius, New York. I wear a few different hats. One of the hats I wear is I'm part of our dairy farming family at Bardland and White Eagle Dairy. My other hat is I'm an agriculture teacher and FFA advisor at Hamilton Central School. Finish up my 14th year. And I'm also on our local Madison County Farm Bureau board as our pro education director. And probably my most important hat that I wear is I'm a mother to two young farm girls, Finley, who's 10, and Reagan, who is 8.
Awesome. And those girls are so funny. You're also obviously active on social media, and those girls are just an absolute riot when they get on there and help you do some different things to help teach the public about dairy farming. They're so funny, and they're just little U's, and it's the cutest thing ever. I enjoy watching them with their heifers and doing all the fun farm facts and all that stuff. So
thank you very much. I also enjoy working with ADA, American Dairy Association, through their social media efforts. So that has certainly helped expand our social media on through the dairy. But I love working with my girls and teaching them how to advocate, and that social media can be for something more than snapping your friends, right? Like, we can actually educate, use social media for good as well. So thank you. It's fun to do it alongside my girls.
not to mention spreading facts about things instead of just nonsense, because as we all know, social media has become one of those things where it's like you don't actually really know, unless you have that authentic person that you're actually following, that you really know that they're telling the truth and that they're well educated in what they're saying. So that's really important as well. And I know you guys are one of the fan favorites here in the Northeast to follow and really get those the dairy facts and the day-to-day life of being on a dairy farm from. So I kind of want to dive in and talk a little bit about how did you get to where you are today? Like, from what I know, you did not grow up on a dairy farm.
Yeah, that's a great question. How did I get to where I'm at today? I did not grow up on a dairy farm. I grew up in Camden, New York, and ultimately my grandfather had a small dairy farm, and I would grow up doing hay in the summers. But ultimately I was a horse girl, right? Like, insert gasp here, right? For when you talk to dairy people. But I mean, ultimately I call myself a horse girl, dairy girl, because I went to college at Morrisville, and I loved every single minute of Morrisville, but I was an equine major from 2000 to 2004 at Morrisville, and that's where I met my husband. So my husband's name is Brett, and he was also a dairy major at Morrisville from 2000 to 2002. And so as luck would have it, we found each other there. So we've been together, since we were freshmen in college, and 20 something odd years later, you're still going strong. So
Hold on, I have to pause you for a second.
Yeah.
How much crap did he get for dating a horse girl from the dairy program?
A lot. You would hear all the traditional, like, hay burners, and you would hear all of, all of those fun things that we all know is said about those, those horse girls, but I learned how to give it back pretty good to them. And I do have to say that, like, obviously my girl still rides, not obviously, but my girls still ride horses and we have horses. But I truly fell in love with the dairy industry through, my relationship and my, love of my husband and developing that, and truly appreciate raising our girls in the dairy industry. Overall, people are more than friendly, helpful, and supportive of each other. And that's what I can truly say. I know you and I have spoken about it, both being horse girls also, that maybe that's a little bit of a difference between the industries, is that in general, dairy people are very supportive of each other. And I love every minute of that. And I truly appreciate that about the dairy industry as the community in general. That's where I became, that's my dairy knowledge, is from the past 25 plus years of being married and marrying into the industry. I went to school for equine, so I was a horseback riding instructor for about 6 or 7 years, and I love teaching. I love education, but I didn't want to be on the road anymore, right? Like living in a barn and living out of on the road and at horse shows. So I went back to school to get my master's in agricultural education. And since 2009, I have been an FFA advisor and agriculture teacher at the same school, at Hamilton Central School, which is really small school located in Hamilton, New York, graduating class of 38 kids. Woohoo. And that really fills my cup, because I can truly say that I don't have your quote unquote traditional ag kids at my school. And I think it's awesome and it's great. You don't certainly have to live on a farm to be involved in ag education. So through that experience, my development and my love of agriculture and teaching has still been fulfilled. And then that also allows me to be involved in our farm in a variety of ways. So I'm in charge of our social media, so our Facebook, our Instagram, and our TikTok accounts. I'm involved in our neighborhood newsletter, so we still do 2 hard print newsletters and mail it out to 16,000 of our closest friends, family, and neighbors. And I do most of our tours. So we do quite a few educational tours or on-farm fest type things throughout the year. So that would be my main role on the dairy farm day to day. And it's really truly fulfilling industry to be a part of.
Good. And do you want to kind of pause here and maybe talk a little bit about the farm itself, just so that, our listeners have an idea of what kind of, how large your farm is and the different things that you guys do?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Barbland and White Eagle Dairy is 4 farm families that collectively farm together here in upstate central New York. So it would be the Bossards, which is my husband Brett and I, the Heismans, which would be Luke and Ashley Heisman, the Enks family, which would be Chip and Karen Enks, and the Carhart family, which would be Ed and Tori Carhart. So 4 of our families collectively farm together, and we milk around 4,400 cows 3 times a day. We collectively work about 10,000 acres over 6 different counties, and have about 85 full-time people on the payroll, up into the 90s during crop season, with part-time and part-time drivers. Collectively, that keeps us very, very busy. Our farms are divided up a little bit. So we milk on 4 different milking locations, which also, keeps things interesting. Our crop works as one large crop crew and does crops at all 4 farms, rotating through. Our milking crew obviously stays at each of the 4 different locations, and they're not moving obviously from location to location. So we're blessed to be able to have amazing employees. We're blessed to be able to have people who are truly experts in their field, not jack of all trades kind of thing. And we're able to do the things that we do. The only reason we are able to do the things that we do is because of our amazing crew that we have behind us.
Definitely. And how, you guys aren't that old. How did a relationship like this come about?
Yeah. Yeah, so my husband and I are 42. Our other partner, Luke and Ashley, they're just 40. So a relationship like this came about when our senior partners at our original farm, Barbland and Fabius, Chip Inks, had 5 children who weren't interested in coming back to work on the farm. So my husband, Brett, had done an internship with Luke during his years at Cornell. Should back up a little bit. Brett went to Morrisville for 2 years and then went to Cornell and graduated Cornell with a dairy science degree at 2004. So he did an internship to be close to that horse girl up here who was working at a horse barn. So he did an internship for Chip in 2004. And the internship turned into Chip approaching my husband, Brett, and our now business partner, Luke, who grew up working at Barbland. He was at Hemdale's out in Western New York at the time, and said, would you guys like to go into partnership with me? This was, back in 2008-ish. So that was Chip's succession, right? Plan. So we became junior partners at that time. And so over that time, the farm has grown to what it is now. And about 4 years ago, the partnership became, we did basically the same thing over here in Hamilton with Carhartt. So Ed and Tori, great, wonderful friends of ours. Ed's been farming over here in Hamilton for a really long time. So is his family. And he had 2 girls who weren't interested in coming back to the farm. But once again, he didn't want to get out of farming, doesn't want to go anywhere, but certainly needed that next generation or that succession plan in place. So we merged with White Eagle there about 4 years ago. And then when opportunity comes, that's where we look for opportunity. So a lot of times people will ask us, like, what is your number? What are you trying to do? Or where, what's the end goal? Our end goal isn't a number. It's not a specific number of cows or acres. It's to be able to farm sustainably and be able to have opportunities for our children to come back to if they choose to in the future. So when opportunity presents itself, if it's the right opportunity for our operation, we take that into consideration, but there's no end goal or number that we are looking to get to. We're just proud to be able to employ 85 farm families in upstate New York, and to be able to, bring quality food to the table. So that's a little bit about the Barbland and White Eagle umbrella a little bit there.
Yeah, that's really neat how that came about. And that's a really great opportunity for those senior partners to basically, know that their lifelong hard work of the farm is going to continue, after they're retired out of it because of partnerships like this, especially when that next generation is not interested. It definitely probably gives them peace of mind and knowing that their things are getting taken care of. Not to mention with all of the, resources and different things, having that partnership probably brings about different opportunities that wouldn't be available if you were just one farm unit, or for you and your husband to get in first. Being a first generation dairy farmer is not an easy task. It's almost impossible in New York State in this area right now. So that's really great that those opportunities just fall into the laps of the right people. And as long as you have the right people to help manage that and get along and bring it in a cohesive direction, which I'm sure is tricky at sometimes, but it's definitely doable, and it's really neat to see how things like that work out. So
yeah, I think the biggest thing there would be that I think that's the most important part, is that us 4 farm families are doing things that we could never all do by ourselves. And I think that's the biggest important message, when we talk to anybody, is that we could not do what we're doing by ourselves, nor do we want to do that by ourselves. I think it's really important that, farm families and generational farms, you don't have to have the same last name. And we'll say that all the time because we are very, very close and operate, as farm families. But at the end of the day, it's also a business. So sometimes we don't have to deal with some of the things that, some farm families have to deal with, because you're working with your aunt or your uncle or your mom or your dad or your stepmom and brother and sister, right? Like, those are the kind of things that at the end of the day, it is run like a business. Yet there's four families that have the same common goal in mind and talk 5,000 times a day on the phone and sit down and look at our business plan and our business model and numbers and facts and spreadsheets to be able to accomplish one large goal together. And I think that's really important because you're exactly right. We are raising the fifth generation on our farm. Like my husband was fourth generation and our girls are fifth generation. But that's exactly how many individuals in dairy are able to get into it nowadays, is because I think there are so few that are willing to sacrifice and go back to a dairy farm, because you and I both know it's a lifestyle, right? It's not a career, it's a lifestyle, and we truly embrace that. But, we have a lot of young kids. I say young, they're in their 20s, I'm in my 40s, but young kids working for us that, we hope to bring on to be our next generation. And we want to do that sooner than later. And there's room and opportunity and growth there. And that's why we say when we see an opportunity, that's where we're trying to build up our next generation to be able to have those opportunities that we've been blessed to be able to have and work hard for as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a great opportunity, like I said, for those young people that don't necessarily have their parents' farm to go back to, whether it be they're not from a farm, but they really have a passion for it, or, maybe they have a bunch of brothers and sisters that it's just not going to work for all of them to go back to the same place. That's really great that you guys are, looking into that, even having your own children, but you're still looking into having outside people coming in to that business. So I kind of want to backpedal a little bit and talk about you getting into the dairy farm, being quote unquote the horse girl. How did that go for you? Like, learning the ropes and kind of getting used to different things kind of on a different level, because I'm sure that it was a lot different than, going to your grandfather's farm as a kid.
Yes. Yeah. My grandfather's farm as a kid, I remember an old tie stall, truly like your old tie stall. My grandfather had a job off the farm because that's what you did, right? Like back then you certainly, you milked cows, and then he drove mail truck. So I never knew anything different. I didn't know that anything else really existed outside of that lifestyle. I knew that us grandkids, I should say, did hay in the summers, right? And I knew that that was like a big event and that was fun, but I didn't know anything else as far as dairy or dairy farming went. My biggest passion, and when I got really, really, really involved, I think, at the dairy farm was when social media, like obviously, I mean, I grew up not necessarily in social media. I was born in 1982, so I didn't get my first cell phone, until I was a sophomore in college. That was like a big deal. I remember like when my dad got one, it was those big pack phones, and it was, no service. And, thank God there wasn't maybe social
I
media
used
in
to play
college
with
is what
my
all
dad.
was.
My dad had one when I was a kid, and when he upgraded to like the next coolest box phone, I got to play with his old one, and I thought I was hot stuff as a little kid playing with that thing, lugging it around. Can you imagine the inconveniences that kids these days would have lugging that thing around?
And we do also joke that thank goodness there wasn't maybe social media in college, because maybe some of us would have different careers. I don't know. So I didn't live through social media necessarily, which is kind of ironic because I am really involved with social media now and I love it. And I think there's great spots for social media. But when I really became truly passionate about our dairy industry and advocating for family farms and farming in general on social media was when I got on social media and I realized that people are truly, truly those 4 to 5 now generations removed from social media, on social media of farming. And when you scroll through and you're reading some of the comments, not just about dairy, I'm talking agriculture in general, it made me mad. And it made me mad because I live on our dairy farm. Like my husband is a dairy farmer. We are truly passionate about the welfare of our employees, the welfare of our animals and our fields, right? That's our lifestyle. That's our livelihood. And we are truly passionate about feeding the world. And when you see comments on social media from people who have gotten their PhD from Instagram, those are the kind of things that really, really light a fire and a spark in my stomach. So the more I got to know dairy, right? My husband grew up on a dairy farm. All of our friends are dairy farmers. I started doing more farm tours at our dairy farm. Our farm started to grow. And even those comments at school from like my teacher friends about their misinformation, they weren't even trying to be rude or mean. I just started to think to myself, wow, I live in a rural community, right? Like I don't live in New York City, or we don't live in a city. Even my teacher friends or my friends from high school were asking questions. And I thought to myself, wow, they really just don't know, right? And if I'm not going to share our farm family story, then someone else is going to share that story. And I don't want someone else to dictate what's happening on our farm. So I choose to put what's happening on our farm out there because we don't have anything to hide. Not that dairy farmers have anything to hide. I think many dairy farmers and farmers in general don't share their story because they're busy, right? Because that's sometimes the last thing on their mind, maybe because they're really great at dairy farming or farming in general, but maybe they don't love communicating and dealing with the public.
Maybe there's a
And they
reason
don't
they work with cows, not people every day. Yep.
exactly, right. And not that they have anything to hide, it's because they don't really maybe sometimes see the value. And I think that's where when the younger generation comes back to the farm, or if there's someone on the farm that does feel comfortable in the public eye or able to communicate, that is such a valuable resource to bring back to any family farm, dairy, equine, chickens, pigs, goats, sheep, crops, you name it, is just sharing those day-to-day stories of what's happening, because that's where my passion started on, is being mad that other people were sharing our story, and it couldn't have been further from the truth. So
Yeah.
that just kind of started to spur things. And then obviously my love of education certainly spawned that. And then we started to get more into the tours and, the on-farm fests and those kind of things kind of just organically grew from me being mad that people were not spreading the truth on social media. That's kind of where it all started from.
So here's Johanna. She's just mad at the world. So she's out to show everybody how it's supposed to be. I love it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Circling back though, I can't even believe I'm going to share this story, which is, you will laugh and think it's great. But the first time I ever went home to my husband, to Brett's parents, we were in college, it's like early 2000s. And he, grew up on a 60 cow tie stall dairy farm. So the first time I met his parents truly, old school farmers, they sat down, they still do sit down, breakfast, lunch, dinner, meat, potato, vegetable. They got up in the mornings together. They milked cows in the tie stall together. His mom would cook, had a little kitchenette, then they'd stop after the barn cleaner ran and they ate, breakfast up there. And it was great. I loved it. Right. But the new girlfriend, horse girl who came home for the first time, they all get up for chores in the morning. And so I get up for chores. At this point, I have no idea what chores even mean. I mean, I had an idea, but like, what was I going to do? So I'm like trying to stay busy, playing with the barn cats, pushing up feed, even though it didn't need pushing up, so his mom says, we're out of butter for breakfast. Maybe you could run down to Sugar Creek, the local convenience store, and grab some butter. And I was like, yes, thinking to myself, finally, I can do that. I can shop. I'll go get butter, right? So I get in the car and I go to Sugar Creek and pick up butter, which I grabbed the first thing on the shelf, which happened to be margarine.
Oh
Okay?
no.
I know.
Oh my gosh, the wrongness.
Bad. And I didn't know. I just grabbed the first block, right? Like I check out. I get
Oh my
back to the farm. I'm feeling so good about myself because I'm feeling useful.
You contributed to breakfast.
I contributed. I certainly wasn't making it, right? His mom's an amazing cook and chef. She's amazing. But so I put it, in her little kitchenette in the barn next to the milk house. And we're all sitting down. His dad's reading his paper, drinking his coffee. I'm sitting and I hear margarine. who got margarine? Look at Brett, my husband. And I was like, oh my God, the look on my face must have been just pure horror. And he's looking at me like, Johanna. And I was like, oh my God, that's all they had. I'm so sorry. That's all they had. Oh, I've definitely gotten butter there before. It was the most horrifying experience, let me tell you, of the meeting the parents for the first time. We laugh about that now. I love my mother-in-law, Kathy. She's amazing. But you can laugh about it 25 years later. At the time, it was not funny, let me tell you. So that's your horse girl goes home to meet dairy boys' parents for the first time story for you.
And if you can make it through bringing margarine into a like small town dairy farmer's kitchen and still marry their son afterwards, you know you're good.
You know
And
you're good.
like set for the family. If you can get through that, you can get through anything. Oh my gosh, that
there you
is
go.
priceless.
There's still hope for all my horse girls that I tell to marry dairy boys all the time out there. So
just, dear God, don't bring margarine back. Whatever you do, check and
nope,
be sure that it is real butter.
Yep, I haven't made that mistake again. So
By
there
all
you go.
means, turn your own next time, okay?
Yeah.
Gosh, at first when you started saying that story, that's what I thought you were going to say is like, get some milk out of the tank, churn some butter so we have fresh butter for breakfast.
They weren't that aggressive, but it was serious.
No, but it went a funnier direction. I do enjoy that. That was quite great. So let's talk more about your love of teaching, because just knowing you for the past, I don't even know how many years that I've known you, your passion for teaching shines through in everything that you do, and shaping youth and just all of that stuff bundled together is fantastic. If I, I would have loved to have had you as an ag teacher when I was a kid. Unfortunately, our school didn't even have an ag program, so I was one of those. I was one of those losers with no ag program.
I know.
But do you want to talk a little bit more about your fun teaching and some of the different things that you've gotten to learn over the years to basically help educate your students to be better off in the future?
Sure. Spinning back to, when I was at Morrisville and backing up there, I went to Camden, just like you're saying. I didn't grow up in an ag program. I didn't even know what FFA was until I got to college, and there was a collegiate FFA chapter. So just like you, I didn't necessarily grow up in ag education. And I think if I had, maybe my path would have been different. I like to say, I think everything happens for a reason, and, not looking back on it negatively at all, because I loved my high school career, but in my high school time. But I think had I had someone who pushed me and believed in me and gave me the opportunities that I feel like agricultural education does and FFA does for all students, not just those farm kids, I think maybe things would have been different. I'm proud that my alma mater, Camden, does have an ag program now, an FFA, and that's awesome and great. But just like you're saying, I didn't even know what FFA was. I literally couldn't even have told you what it stood for, back when I was in college. So I think with that being said, I think it's an opportunity. Ag ed is an opportunity for everybody. And I think that's what makes agriculture education special, is that you don't have to grow up in ag to reap the benefits of hands-on inquiry-based learning, right? So at Hamilton, I teach a variety of classes. I teach anything from welding and ag mechanics, small engines, and woodworking.
Now pause there. How does the horse girl get into this stuff?
Yeah. The horse girl went to college and graduated with an equine degree, and then was a horseback riding instructor and went back to get my master's in ag education. But ultimately in ag education, you're not taking classes in animal science and horticulture and welding and woodworking like I teach now. You are learning how to be a teacher. And it kind of goes back to that, like, saying that, like, they're not really teaching you what you need to know to be a teacher in teacher school, right? Like they're teaching you stuff that you're like, you don't realize you're never going to, I shouldn't say never. You don't realize you're seldom going to use those things, that they're the books that you're reading and the essays you're writing and the papers they're making you do. That's not real teaching, okay? Like that's not like down in the trenches, certainly not ag education teaching. So when I got hired at Hamilton, they were like, okay, like we have a welding lab, we have a wood shop, we have gardens, we have all this stuff. And so like that's what you're going to teach. And I was like, oh my God. I didn't even know what welding, I mean, I knew what welding was, but I didn't know how to strike an arc. I certainly wasn't drawing any beads. I wasn't in any way, shape, or form ready to be teaching welding. So I went back to my alma mater once again, Morrisville, and I had a wonderful professor, Jim Taylor, that that whole summer prior to me starting to teach in '09, literally met with me on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and he taught me how to weld. Right. So like, I didn't know how to. And I think that spawns back to if you don't know how to do something, there's a way to figure it out, right?
Yep.
And if you want something bad enough, you'll find a way to do it, right? So I didn't know how to weld, but I do now. And welding in my mechanics class is one of my favorite classes of all time. Woodworking and making benches and picnic tables and CNC machines and laser engraving. I did not know how to do all those things, right? So sometimes ag education is staying one step ahead of the kids, right? It's also being transparent and saying it's okay to make mistakes, right? It's okay to fail as long as we worked hard, we tried, we figured out what we did wrong, and we don't give up and we keep moving forward. And I think that's the difference between ag education and quote unquote other classes
Mm-hmm.
where maybe they're teaching more to a test. I'm not teaching to a test. I tell my students every single day, there's a test in here every single day. When we walk out to the welding lab and they start up the oxyacetylene torches, if they don't follow the correct safety startup procedures, shutdown procedures, and use of the welding or oxyacetylene tanks or plasma cutter, they can get hurt. They can hurt other people and they can also damage property. If that's not a test, well, and I have never known of a real life test ever. So I think that, ag education lends itself to give students opportunities to grow and to learn, and it doesn't have to be on a piece of paper. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's what's really missing in our school system and in our society now. But I love to be able to bring all those opportunities, to my kids here. So whether that's through my vet science class and students learning how to give a shot and draw blood and wrap and bandage and temperature pulse respiration, or whether that's through my horticulture class and learning how to make a bouquet or a boutonniere or plant in the garden or harvest or make jam, right? Or to weld and mechanics and everything in between, you're giving students an opportunity to work hands-on, prove that there are so many opportunities for them in the field of agriculture.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really love about it too is, I stand on the soapbox, not all kids are cut out for, you know, going to college, doing the scholar route, doing the writing, the reading, the traditional classroom stuff. This gives those opportunities to those kids that maybe aren't that great in a normal classroom setting. It gives them a sense of belonging and basically some skills that are hands-on that they can excel at without, feeling like a failure maybe in their other classes, and maybe show them that there's more to life than, well, you have to graduate high school and then you have to go to college and then you have to get a, this fancy career. Like there's so many different trade jobs, and this ag in the classroom just basically helps those kids figure out like, hey, I loved doing welding class in high school. I think I'm going to go to a welding school and learn a trade. And I mean, heck, those kids can make more money than kids that go to college, and they have, nowhere's near the student debt and, all of the other headaches that go along with it. And I think that that's so important to make sure that kids are aware. And that's why I feel that it's so important to have those programs for kids to be able to participate in while they're in school, because it shows them that there's a whole nother world out there, because not everybody is cut out for straight A's. Not everybody is cut out for college. Not everybody is cut out to work in an office in the city every day. And I think that for a long time,
100%.
education went in that direction to where like it was almost cookie cutter. And I think that it really has bitten society in the butt, because there's a lot of generational people that don't, they're not into trades, or they look down upon people that are in trades. And I think it's so important to bring awareness to, the public that, we need those people that do those trades. Like, if you don't create more plumbers, what are you going to do when you're working in your skyscraper and someone calls from home and says, "Hey, we have no water. What do we do?" Sorry,
Yeah,
there's no
I
plumbers
think,
to call. Like, we have no
yeah,
tradespeople. So I
yeah.
just love what you and other
Well,
agricultures are doing and out there making a difference in kids' lives that would otherwise have probably a pretty poor experience in school.
thank you. Thanks. I appreciate that. And I think the biggest thing when you hit the nail on the head saying, sometimes I think when you maybe even other teachers or someone says to me like, this kid gives me a hard time in English, or this kid
Hmm.
won't do any math for me, or this kid, is like just fights me in science. I I really don't have in general those kind of problems with kids down here
Hmm.
because we are constantly doing English and math and science down here as part of all of my agricultural education classes. But I don't say, today, guys, we're doing this math problem. Instead, it looks like in the greenhouse, our fertilizer, our dosatron, we need to add fertilizer to our dosatron. So we need to do math, right,
Hmm.
to calculate how many ounces per gallon if we want it to be at 150 parts per million to water, to fertilize our poinsettias.
Hmm.
Never once did I say, today we're doing this math thing. I said to them, today we have to, add to our dosatron, blah, 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 right? And then we talk about what that means. And
Hmm.
they understand it because they understand why we're talking about it, because it is a tangible thing that they can see, right? It's not a
Yeah.
pie in the sky hypothetical answer, right? It's actually something, and they're using those skills to do something to see, right? I
Hmm.
don't have a problem with kids reading down here. It's not that kids can't read. It's that,
They're
when
not
we're
interested.
not interested, right? When we're disassembling our four-stroke engines, like we do every year, they're reading the disassembly manual, right? About the gasket and the piston ring and, you name it. They're not reading Beowulf, right? Because they don't want to read Beowulf. And that's not to take anything away from the kids who do, right? I mean,
Yep.
I'm using Beowulf as an example, but like some kids are going to be much better off if they can understand that you're making me read the disassembly manual because we're disassembling this four-stroke engine, right? And in the
Mhm.
process, I'm also learning how to get my spark plug and change the oil and to, right, like all the things that go along with that. I don't say today we're going to read, guys. I say today we're taking apart our four-stroke engine. Just reading is part of it. So I think it's all about how you also, I'm going to say the word disguise,
Mhm.
right? Like the science, the math, and the English to the kids. It's just disguised. They don't ever fight me on those things because they understand why we're doing those
Yep.
things. And I think that's where ag education flourishes, and just like you said, big soapbox of mine, also, that's why we're friends, is that absolutely you do not need to go to college to be successful. I can't say that enough. And that's speaking to you're speaking to someone that has a master's degree. Like, and
Mhm.
I value education. I am a teacher, and I think there's wonderful opportunities within higher education, but it's not to take away at all from those trade academies, from those apprenticeship programs, from those school to work programs, through those internship programs. I can't say enough about those opportunities for our students, and do think the narrative is changing slowly. I think you're right. I think, when I went to school, right, when we went to school, I can still remember back in Camden, right? Like little old Johanna at Camden High School. I didn't want to stay in high school, right?
Mhm.
Like I didn't want to stay in high school, and I kind of was like bored. And I remember my mom and my dad and I went to visit Bosie's. And back then Bosie's was not, right, a place that
Yeah.
the smart kids, and I
Yeah.
air quotes, right, smart kids went. I was a smart kid in school, but I just didn't really like it, right? And so my mom, who worked in the school system, said, let's go visit Bosie's. And they didn't have hardly any promotion of that short of your parents kind of taking you, because smart kids weren't promoted to go visit there, right? It was the not smart kids that
Yep.
went there.
It was the
And I
troublemakers
remember
that they wanted to get out of the classroom.
exactly,
Yep.
100%. And I remember this is, 30 years ago, I walked into my guidance counselor, as a 10th, going to be 11th grader to set up my schedule. And I still remember, I won't say her name. She was a wonderful lady, but certainly not guiding in the correct way. I said, I really want to go to Bossie's next year. And she said, and I will remember this as the day is long. It was just she and I in her, in her little cubicle office, and she leaned towards me and kind of like got a little quiet. And she goes, honey, you don't want to do that. You want to stay here. You're right. You want to do AP blah blah blah. I don't even know what she said to me. And I was like, little 15-year-old me. I said, okay. And she goes, you go home and you talk to mom and dad about that tonight. And then you come back and you talk and you let me know what they say tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And I went home and I talked to mom and dad. And my mom said, she said, what to you? And I was like, she doesn't think I should go there. And she was like, you're going to go there. And my parents were so supportive of me back then and understood that narrative wasn't okay even 30 years ago. And it certainly isn't okay now. But that stereotype of those bad kids or, the dumb kids that went to BOCES was certainly prevalent in my high school. And I just hope and pray that nowadays that narrative is going away, because I cannot tell you the amazing opportunities that our local BOCES programs in New York State have. And then obviously our ag education programs that are housed within high school, middle schools are giving our students nowadays. So I have firsthand knowledge of what it felt like for someone to tell me, no, that's not quote unquote good enough. Right? Like you should fit into this mold. And I think that stereotype needs to be shattered and broken. And I'm here to do it with my kid, right?
Those darn guidance counselors, I had my heart set, which of course I went to the rival school to yours, SUNY Cobleskill, but my guidance counselor was like, you're only applying to one college. And I was like, yeah, because this is where I want to go. Like, I know I want to go here. Well, you should apply to some other ones just in case you decide against it. I was like, no, I really don't want to spend money on applying to other schools. Like, I'm already into this one. I have my heart set on this one. Like, why would I bother wasting my time applying for other schools when, like, I know that that's not meant for me? And when you know, which I understand if I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do, or if, but they were like, kind of like, you're going to go for this. Like, why would you go there for this? Why wouldn't you go to, Cornell or somewhere's bigger? And I was like, because I don't want to. Like, if this is, I'm comfortable, like, this is what I'm comfortable with. This is where I want to go. Wherever things lead me in the future is where things lead. But, like, guidance counselors, man, I tell you.
And I have some wonderful ones now in our school.
Oh, yeah.
It's about educating the guidance counselors, though, too, right? Like, so, because unfortunately, I think it has to do with the town or the city or the place that you live in, right? Your administration that you have in place, your board of education, right? That ultimately is making a lot of decisions on behalf of, administration, schools, teachers. So I think it is certainly school to school, but the more education that we can have for the people making decisions on behalf of our kids, the better, right? And ultimately, I think it's also about educating parents, right? Because if parents don't know what's happening or the opportunities that their kids can have, they can't help to push them in directions either. Sometimes you'll run into those parents that no matter how much that kid might want to pursue a trade or to pursue something, parents aren't having it, right? Like I had a student this year who loved welding, wanted to go to welding school, right? And go to trade school. Talked to his parents about it several times, talked to me about it several times, went to his parents with great ideas of trade schools for welding he wanted to go. And his parents said, no, after you get a 4-year degree, then you can do whatever you.
That's
me is, unfortunately, we're still educating adults, right?
Yeah.
And I think that unfortunately, it's one of those kind of situations where sometimes you're just not going to change how some people think, and you can
Yep.
only try to change the things that are within your control. But it gets a little frustrating sometimes as a ag teacher
Yeah,
when you have to have those kind of conversations.
definitely. It's crazy, but I'm happy that it seems like times are changing again, thankfully. We can get rid of that stigma that everyone needs to fit into a box because I definitely think that here in 2024, not everybody fits within the same box, and that's okay. And it's important to remember that that's okay. So,
Absolutely.
with that, Johanna, I want to hop into some more fun rapid fire questions to get to know a little bit more about you. Um,
Okay.
but these are the
A little
fun
scared
ones.
here.
No, 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 no. Beach or mountains?
Ooh. I'm a big fan of the beach. I really do like the beach. I even listen to an app to go to bed at night, which has the ocean waves on it. So that's like my sleep app. So I'm definitely gonna have to say beach on that one.
I would be with you. Mountains are just too tall. And I certainly hate driving through them. So my gosh. If you could live, or if you could not live where you are right now, if you had to move somewheres, where would you go? Anywheres in the world.
Funny you ask me that because I
Oh,
always joke with my husband that I don't want us to buy any more dairy farms in upstate New York because I am not a fan of the winter. Okay. Like the older I get, the less of a fan of winter I want to be. So I say, I know that other farms are being sold in the South, like Georgia's or the Carolinas, right? Or like maybe not as far south as like Texas, Florida, because that's like really hot. And then to which he reminds me they have lots of snakes down there, and I am terrified of snakes.
mm-hmm.
So that's kind of makes me not think that. But if I were going to go anywhere, I would like to be someplace a little bit warmer. I could definitely see myself Carolinas, Tennessee area, a little bit more bound um, for a little bit nicer weather, winter time.
I mean, I'm there with you. I also live in New York State and I hate the winters. So I'm there with you. What is your favorite flower?
I love, love, love lilacs. It's absolutely my favorite flower. Love the smell. That's my favorite smell of all time. So that would be my favorite flower in the summer. Only comes out for a short amount of
Yep.
time, but I'm here for it.
We have lilacs here, and I, the last few years, have become very allergic to them, which is
Oh
really
no.
crappy because there was nothing I loved more than putting a nice fresh bouquet of lilacs in my house.
Right.
And now when I walk by the bushes, I'm like, it's terrible.
That's
But I
not
still
good.
love the smell of them. They just make me not be able to breathe. It's terrible.
That's not good. Yeah.
I know. Adult allergies, they really stink. So,
Right.
your favorite childhood memory?
Hmm. Favorite childhood memory. I grew up right across the road from I'm one of three girls, and I grew up right across the road from my three boy cousins, and we were all about the same age. So some of my favorite childhood memories have to do with them. We didn't have we had a creek out back. We called it, the creek. We would go swimming in the creek. We would walk out to the quote unquote big rock, right? This like huge rock, and we'd have lunch and picnics on the big rock. When we got a little bit older, like I would have my girlfriends stay the night and they would have their boyfriends stay the night, right? And we would have like bonfires and cookouts and play hide and seek, like those are like some of my best childhood memories is growing up so close with my cousins and making all those memories together.
That's fun. See, and that's one thing that I hope kids today can get is those memories. They're so important. It's not like we remember, playing a game on my phone with my friends. Like
Mhm.
just those
Yes.
outdoor, creative, fun memories. I don't know if this is politically inappropriate or not, but this is my podcast, so I can say what I want. My cousin, I'm as an only child, I have female cousin who's the same age as me, and then a male cousin, her brother, who's a couple years younger than us. But we used to play on my grandparents' farm, and we would play like cowboys and Indians in the woods, and we'd make like bows out of like branches that we found, and
Yep.
we'd watch like the
Yep.
old westerns and stuff and go out and play in the woods and stuff. It was just so much fun. And like those are the memories that, I want my kids to have too, not, just what they're doing on technology. So that is important.
100%. When you see that, like that meme that you see or that saying that you see of like, because no child remembers their best day watching TV, right? Like when you
Yeah.
talk to, or, children or adults or teenagers, no one says like the best thing I did this summer was watch YouTube. I mean, I hope that at least not what they're saying, right? But those core memories are made surrounded by those people that you love, whether it's family or friends that you think of as family, and making those memories is just so important. And same with you. We're
For
trying to do
real.
the same with our girls,
Yeah. And I have one more of like my rapid fire questions. The best vacation you've ever been
Ooh, well, the best vacation we've ever been on is to New Zealand. So
on?
we
Ooh.
have great dairy farm friends in New Zealand that went to college with Brett and graduated, and he was here for a year abroad. And so back a long time ago, we got to go, he got married. And so we flew to New Zealand. And after he was married, we toured the whole South Island together, like 6 of us, friends, along with, the newly married couple. And it was amazing. It was so cool. I've never been anywhere like it ever again. And it was amazing to see the contrast of their dairy farming versus farming, dairy
Mhm.
farming in the United States, and their quota system, and just all the things that are just so different to their
It's very
islands. So different, but very interesting, very cool. Just the bungee jumping and the, helicopters. And I mean, just everything is just so, so different over there. It was awesome. So hope to be able to get back over there again
Yeah.
sometime. But that was amazing vacation.
Well, there you go. New Zealand, is that where they don't have snakes in New Zealand, right? Do they have snakes there?
Correct. No snakes. And our winter is their summer.
That's just a
So I
very long commute.
very like it's like a 20-hour
Yeah.
plane. I mean, not continuous, right? But like it's like you sleep overnight, right? And then you go to
Yep.
bed, you're like up the next morning kind of thing. So it's a very long haul for sure. Yes.
And now I'm going to ask you a question that was left from a previous guest. It's more of a deep thought question. So these are all questions that are left from previous guests that I kind of picked them because obviously you have to ask people certain types of questions based upon who they are.
Right.
So this one, if you had to change what sector of ag you are in, like if you had to get out of dairy farming, out of ag education, and just go be a completely different type of farmer, what would you do?
That's a wonderful question.
And no
And
horses
some
either,
days when
because
I'm
we know you're
teaching,
the horse girl.
some days when I'm teaching, I ask myself that maybe more often than others. What the heck am I doing? What else am I gonna do? And then you have the good days. I would love to do, I know this sounds crazy, but I would love to do more agritourism
Mhm.
and kind of like a Fair Oaks type of model where bring people in and you have like no matter what it is, whether like it's a little farm that has everything on it where you can truly like bring kids in and teachers and classrooms and be able to share farming and agriculture story. I would love to be able to also have our own ice cream stand there. There's a local ice cream place that's for sale that I would just love to be able to buy and to be able to bring that to consumers, right? And it would be cool to be able to show them through the farm through agriculture. Then they could see the whole process until it got to their end product. So I would love to be able to make that something that was able to make a living and bring more agritourism to our area. As of right now, that's not paying the bills. So that's just what I'm doing at nighttime and on weekends. But I would love to be bigger in the agritourism field.
Very good. And we love for our guests to end with, a quote or saying or something that drives them to be the best that they can be on the daily. What is your piece of advice or quote for us today?
My quote would be, never let anybody tell you that you don't belong there. And I think that goes back to my whole journey of how I got to be in the dairy industry, right? So if I had let some of the people, quote unquote, tell me, or the naysayers or people who maybe question you from time to time that you don't belong someplace, then we would never make progress, right? And so I think that the biggest word of advice that I have to young people or to anyone who's pursuing a career or a passion or a love is that don't let anyone stand in your way of that. If this is something that you want to do, then pursue it with everything that you have and don't let anyone tell you that you can't, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to work hard. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have setbacks or obstacles. Pursue it with all your heart and just know that it will work out the way it's supposed to in the end.
I love it. That's great. Great advice. Johanna, is there anything else that you are dying to get off your chest?
No, there's nothing I'm dying to get off my chest, but I want to throw it out to you that shout out to you for starting this podcast. I know that you and I have talked about it, and it was like certainly something you've been wanting to do in a labor of love. And I think you are rocking it and you're bringing agriculture to the masses in an amazing, upbeat, exciting way. So thank you for representing dairy farmers in your podcast hour. It's fun to follow along, and I am super proud of you
Oh,
for
thank
doing.
you. Thank you. It means a lot. I very much appreciate that. And with that, Johanna, where can people follow along with your adventures?
Sure. So you can follow along on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Barbland and White Eagle Dairy. And you can follow along for my ag education endeavors and all the fun things we're doing in ag classes, including all the welding on Hamilton Central School Ag. And that's on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Awesome. And I will link those in the show notes for those of you that are interested in checking out the adventures of Johanna. And with that, don't forget, if you loved this episode, please share with a friend. That is the best way to get new people to follow the Dairy Hour podcast. And it is always appreciated. Also, please leave a review. And with that, Johanna, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You are an absolute inspiration to those in ag and, you know, especially for the next generation coming out. You are such an inspirational person. It's always great for the youth in agriculture or not in agriculture that maybe have an interest. It's so great that they have you on their side. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you all for listening. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next week.